Here's a deep cut for my Mets fans. Mike Jacobs was a 38th round signee in the 1999 MLB draft, originally playing as a catcher. He'd returned from injury in 2005 as a first baseman, where he won the AA MVP award with Binghamton. He got called up that year and stayed hot with his bat, hitting a pinch hit 3-run homer in his first major league at-bat. In doing so, he became just the 4th player in Mets history to hit a home run in their first at-bat. He was a spark plug for the Mets this year, homering 3 times in his first 4 games. He had a fantastic 30-game run in his rookie season, homering 11 times in 100 at-bats, good for a .710 slugging percentage and a 180 OPS+. His 11 home runs through 100 at-bats is tied with the likes of Gary Sanchez and Shane Spencer, some Yankee legends, and only outdone by Rhys Hoskins and Will Smith, who hit 12, and Aristides Aquino, who hit 13 a couple years ago. In one of the better moves I can recall the old regime making, the Mets sold Jacobs at his highest value when the Florida Marlins came calling and made Carlos Delgado available via trade in the offseason. Delgado finished 6th in NL MVP voting the past year with a 161 OPS+, but the Marlins were trending in a non-competitive direction. The Marlins received Jacobs and Yusmeiro Petit in the deal, and Delgado went to the Mets to be a part of their 2006 NL East champion team. Jacobs performed decently well for Florida over 3 seasons with 69 home runs and a 105 OPS+. His career would end shortly after in 2012. But Jacobs was never more high profile than in his first season in 2005 with his home run barrage. He might have been a flash in the pan, but he turned out to be a pretty good MLB slugger. Next up on the list is Taylor Youngman, or as I like to call him, Taylor. Taylor Youngman's time in the spotlight was only about 1 season, but he sticks out in my mind for some reason. Youngman was taken by the Brewers with the 12th overall pick in 2011, ahead of the likes of Brandon Nimmo, Jose Fernandez, Sonny Gray, and Colton Wong. He was highly touted ahead of his debut year in 2015, and he delivered for the crew upon arrival. Despite posting an abysmal 9.87 ERA in 8 AAA starts, the Brewers promoted Youngman to the major leagues to make his MLB debut on June 9th. Youngman would dazzle in his first 2 months, posting a 2.26 ERA through his first 11 starts, including a 1.77 ERA and 5 July starts. Youngman would finish the season with a 3.77 ERA in 21 starts, and his decline in performance later in the season likely came because of fatigue. These starts came without much pressure as the Brewers sold at the deadline and acquired prospects like Josh Hader, Adrian Hauser, and Zach Davies, which I talked about in my last video. However, his struggles bled into the next season. Youngman went 0-4 with a 9.15 ERA in 5 starts the next year, resulting in a demotion to AAA Colorado. He wouldn't return until September, and he'd pitch in just 4 more MLB games before disappearing completely. He'd pitch in Japan for the Yomiuri Giants for 2 seasons and pitch well in Indie Ball in 2020. Still, for a first-round draft pick, it's surprising how quick his time in the MLB was. Next up is Ryan Roberts, a personal favorite of mine. Roberts' unlikely story began when he was an 18th round draft pick in 2003. One of the latest picked position players from the class to sign and end up making the majors. Other notable late draft picks who signed that year include Jason Mott, Brad Ziegler, Brian Wilson, and Johnny Venters. Roberts is mostly known for 2 big grand slams, one which was a walk-off grand slam in the regular season, and another which came in the NLDS Game 4, but we'll get to that in a second. Roberts clawed his way to the bigs after just 3 minor league seasons and never posting an OPS below 750. He was scrappy, he hit naturally, and he could play multiple positions, making him a dream utility player. He played in just 18 MLB games from 2006 to 2008 before finally getting a full-time crack with the Diamondbacks the next year. He played in 110 games in his first full season in 2009 with an OPS plus of 103 to go with 26 extra base hits. He'd miss most of 2010 with injury and then become a D-backs folk hero the following year. In his career best season, Roberts played in 143 games, posting a 108 OPS plus, 18 stolen bases, and 19 home runs while playing 4 different positions. In the NLDS against the Brewers, he would bat .350 and club 2 home runs, including the grand slam that I mentioned before that came in Game 4. In his only postseason showing, he balled out. He'd slow down in 2012 and then be traded to the Rays and Red Sox before fading from MLB in 2014. Sean Tolleson had probably the most unlikely journey of any player featured on today's list. He incredibly became a big league mainstay despite being drafted in the 30th round by the Dodgers in 2010. Only Kevin Kiermaier was drafted later, signed, and became a big league regular. Tolleson was the primary closer at each level in the minor leagues, working in 57 total games with a 1.17 ERA and 25 saves, which are really impressive numbers for a guy that was taken in the 30th round. He was the Dodgers minor league pitcher of the year in 2011, and despite being such a late pick, it took Tolleson only 2 years to make the bigs with the Dodgers. He'd pitched to a 4.30 ERA in 40 games in 2012, but after just one appearance in 2013, he'd undergo season-ending surgery to fix a herniated disc in his back and a hip injury thereafter. Because of this, the Texas Rangers were eventually able to nab him off waivers, and by 2015, Tolleson was Texas's closer. Between 2014 and 2015, Sean Tolleson pitched to a 2.88 ERA in 137 games with 35 saves in the latter season. He'd pitched 3 scoreless innings in 2 postseason appearances that year. However, he'd be removed from the role after posting an ERA over 9 with 3 blown saves over his first 18 games in 2016. This would be his last year as a regular big leaguer, and after battles with Tommy John surgery down the line, he retired in 2019. From 2002 to 2007, Ryan Ludwig was a career journeyman and minor league mainstay. He registered just 224 games for 3 different teams over that span, batting .251 with a 98 OPS+. Not really numbers that jump off the page. The window was closing on his MLB opportunities, that is until the 29-year-old received a spring training invite with the St. Louis Cardinals. He'd make the club and start hot in St. Louis. In 2008, he'd hit 13 home runs with a 1.086 OPS in the first 2 months of the season, and quickly assumed an everyday role with the Cardinals. He'd bat 5th in their lineup most of the time, providing much-needed lineup protection behind Albert Pujols. Ludwig was named to his first All-Star game in 2008, and he also won the National League Player of the Week award for July,
where he went 14 for 26 with 4 home runs and 8 RBIs.
Ludwig would also go on to win a Silver Slugger at the end of the season for his offensive performance alongside Matt Holliday and Ryan Braun in the outfield. His 37 home runs matched Albert Pujols' total from 2008, the first teammate to come even remotely close to usurping Pujols as the Cardinals' home run king during his time in St. Louis. Ludwig would have some decent years after this season, but it was really the 2008 season that put him on the map, and that's what sticks in my memory as well.
Ludwig would finish his career with 154 career home runs, 84 of those coming with the Cardinals and 37 coming with the division rival Cincinnati Reds, and also a couple from his random pit stop with the Pittsburgh Pirates in 2011.
Bobby Parnell was a 9th-round draft pick for the Mets in 2005, and though he turned out to be a diamond in the rough and a great pick for the Mets, it was their mishandling of him that ultimately resulted in his demise. Parnell originally arrived as a reliever in 2009, but after appearing in 54 games, they made the decision to try and stretch him out as a starter. His first start against the Giants went well enough with 6 scoreless innings, but he'd get tagged for 22 runs in 12 2/3 innings pitched over his next 3 starts. He'd eventually land back in the bullpen after seeing his ERA balloon from 3.74 to 5.60. Parnell maintained a 2.98 ERA from 2010 to 2012 as a solid reliever for the Mets, earning him the closer's job in 2013. This would be his career year as he locked down 22 saves with a 2.16 ERA and received All-Star consideration, but the roof was about to come crashing in on the rising star. He maintained his role in 2014, but after blowing an opening day save, he tore his UCL and was slated for Tommy John surgery. Bullet Bob's velocity decreased drastically, and he'd pitch in just 36 more games after 2014 before fading from the league. It isn't proven, but I think the Mets did decent damage to Parnell's arm in 2009, shifting him randomly to the rotation out of necessity while also using him 3 days in a row on 5 separate occasions during the season. That's a ton of strain for a rookie's arm, and it's a shame because I really liked watching Bobby Parnell pitch. Last up on today's list is Cristian Guzman. He became a Minnesota Twin after a trade with the Yankees that sent Chuck Knobloch to New York. Guzman became a key part of the Twins teams that won 3 consecutive AL Central titles from 2002 to 2004. Guzman was the definition of a traditional speedster. While a Twin, he led the American League in triples on 3 separate occasions, in 2000, 2001, and 2003. His total of 20 triples in 2000 was only the 10th time a player had reached that number in the last 70 seasons. From 2000 to 2003, he also stole 83 bases and accumulated 2.6 defensive wins above replacement. He turned his productive seasons in Minnesota into a 4-year deal with the Nationals come 2005. He'd perform poorly in 2005 and play in just 46 games the following 2 years due to injuries. It was looking as though the deal was a complete waste, that is until the final year of the contract in 2008. He'd end up recording the first ever hit in Nationals Park in March of that year. That year would be his best season in Washington as he'd finally stave off injury and play in 138 games while making the NL All-Star team. In August of that year, he hit for the cycle against the Dodgers, only the second cycle in Nationals history to that point. Guzman would have one more full season after 2008 before bouncing around teams and minors deals, eventually hanging up his cleats in 2012 as a 34-year-old. That'll do it for today's video. I'm the Jolly Olive, and I'll see you guys next time.